Hello and welcome to Piano Improvisation from day one. Today we enter into the world of piano improvisation, a unique musical experience. Wow! Here we are! First lecture of piano improvisation from day one. I'm really excited and very happy that we are here together. In this first lecture we will treat some questions like what really is improvisation? Which competences do I need to improvise in a free way? And then, is it right that improvisation is such a free thing? Or are there also constraints, are there limits? Well, these questions lead us then to another question. People often say improvisation is like storytelling. The musician, the improviser, tells something like a personal story to the audience. What does that really mean? And is it right? Okay, we will speak about these things, and then at last I will give you some comments and recommendation about literature, and I hope you will enjoy this first lecture. When Carl Czerny composed his opus 200, a systematic introduction to improvisation on the pianoforte in the early 19th century, he wrote, "The talent and the art of improvising consists in the spinning out of each original or even borrowed idea into a sort of musical composition which must be comprehensible and interesting." To me, this is a very interesting statement. The ideas of an improvisation may be your own, but may be also borrowed. An improvisation is a composition. Okay, it has a freer form than a written work. And this musical work has to be composed during the very performance, on the spur of the moment and without special immediate preparation. And though its form may be very free, it must be comprehensible and interesting, as Carl Czerny says. High standards. It means that improvisation is composing without the possibility of using a rubber, without the availability of an undo button. It's real-time composing during the performance. And that makes improvisation such a unique experience, not only for the audience, also for the improviser. That makes improvisation so exciting. Now, what are the necessary competences for musical improvisation? There are two different systems of knowledge the improviser has to have. On one hand, an explicit and implicit knowledge of notes, tones, chords, scales, chord progressions, and so on, of the musical reality. Why may this knowledge also be implicit? Well, imagine there are certain musicians who may have the ability to improvise, but when you ask them, what have you done there? They cannot explain it. They do not know in terms of theoretical aspects of music what they have done. So I think it's obvious. Explicit knowledge has many advantages in the process of the learning of improvisation. Then there is the procedural knowledge. That means knowing how to move the fingers, the hands, the arms. One often says that you have to have the brain in your fingers. When people listen to an improvisation concert, they often believe that the improviser, the musician, acts in total freedom. That's not true. Improvisation always stands between freedom and constraint. The improviser gets his freedom from his very personal knowledge base, from his repertoire, from all his competences and movement programs, from the sum of his musical problem-solving techniques. But there are also constraints. A musical piece has to be played in a certain style. If the musician suddenly changes the style, this can produce laughter in the audience, because the audience understands what is style. Independent of the level of musical education, an audience normally understands music. And there are also other constraints, like constraints in the musical form, in the harmonic form, in stylistic formulas, and so on. And we should not forget the personal constraints. Of course, these constraints are very different for a beginner and for an experienced musician. The wonderful classical pianist Robert Levin has made 2 statements to this subject that I like really very much. I suggest that you read these sentences here and think a little bit about it. We often hear that a good improviser tells his own personal story during the process of improvising. Experienced musicians with their own explicit knowledge and procedural knowledge have the capability to transmit their personal emotions, put them into melodies and into rhythm and into harmonies, and tell this all to their audience. And the audience will understand it and will enjoy it. Paul F. Berliner, in his wonderful book Thinking in Jazz, The Infinite Art of Improvisation, has written about this phenomenon. I want to cite one sentence only here. When great artists explore ideas with a force of conviction, they mesmerize the audience by moving toward goals with such determination and logic that their direction seems inevitable, their final creations compelling. Now, before we go over to the next lecture of how to learn improvisation, I would like to recommend you some books, articles, or websites on this subject. Of course, a long list would be confusing, so I've reduced my list to 3 books and 3 websites which I love very much. Have a look. Enjoy thinking and reading about improvisation, and we see us in the next lecture.